Okay.
Test. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is everyone ready?
Sure.
Neoliberalism has declared war on all discourses. It shifted our priorities and caused creative destruction to our way of life. Neoliberalism sought 4% an open criticism of the neoliberal system by pointing out the inevitable conclusion of war policies, endless war, and native control. Redmond 12. Hybridity is the root of the evolutionary speed of the transnational video game industry. The other crucial factor was the arrival of the internet. Digital technologies open up possibilities for decentralization, diversification. The most important change between MGS4 and previous iterations is the explicit critique of Neolib. Neolib has become a hegemonic mode of discourse. It has become incorporated into the way many of us understand the world process. Entailed the creative destruction not only of prior institutional frameworks and powers, but also the division of labor, social relations, welfare provisions, technological mixes, ways of life and thought and reproductive activities, attachments to land and the habits of heart. It seeks to bring all human actions into the domain of the market. MGS4 openly critiques the hegemony of those market transactions by the neo-colonial wars to the U.S. empire to neoliberalism's culture of financialization. This link started visible in the opening title sequence. Opening shot of Dusky Battlefield somewhere in the Middle East. Bombed out buildings, corpses lined the road. The soundtrack plays a mournful song called Lofting. The camera shows close shots of militia members, their faces threatened to board, but particularly shocked. Snake speaks his voiceover. War has changed. It's no longer about nations, ideologies, or ethnicity. It's an endless series of proxy battles fought by mercenaries and machines. War and its consumption of human life has become the well-oiled machine. ID-tag soldiers carry ID-tag weapons to use ID-tag gear. Nanomachines intercept their bodies, enhance and regulate their abilities. Genetic control, information control, emotion control, battlefield control. Everything is modern and kept under control. War has changed. The age of deterrence has become the age of control, and all in the name of averting catastrophe from weapons of mass destruction. And he who controls the battlefield controls history. War has changed, and when the battlefield's under total control, war becomes routine. The irony is that the war has not changed in the slightest. Warfare remains horrifying. MGS4's game world is modeled on painstaking research into contemporary military hardware. And the MGS Frank Chase is one of the staunchest critics of the two most prolific apologetics for violence. First is the fawning news coverage of the U.S. Empire's 21st century war. The second is glorification of the U.S. Empire and its new colonial wars, which remain pervasive in the first-person video game shooter. ID attacks are straightforward extrapolation of our ID chips. These chips are key means of tracking subcomponents and supply chains and enable companies to coordinate transnational networks of production and transnational distribution. The economic violence of neoliberalism, every bit as destructive as wartime conflict, unemployment, misration, and malnutrition are less newsworthy than armed conflict because they cost just as many lives. The biggest threats to such power, its interruption of communication, new system breakdown, dysfunction of stress, and our affirmative embrace an alternative, not through some utopian action, but by allowing imagination to alternatives to neoliberalism. Our process of debate deliberation is key to exploring the video game comments and challenging neoliberal control over ideology. Redmond 12. The video game comments is beginning to deliver forms of critique which are superior to quality and accuracy to those delivered by advertising dependent commercial sites. MGS4 has foreshadowed one of the key geopolitical shifts of those signing the post-neoliberal era. Games is not depict multipolarity. Some utopian ideal, but embody the world as they wish to realize. They disrupt and negate the stereotypes of nationality, race, sexuality, or gender, which reflect their respective jobs. Just acknowledging and thinking through and critiquing those performances is a necessary first step to reclaiming our digital labor as our own video game philosophy. Break loose from the planetary past of neoliberalism to limit the possibility, no matter how faint or of transforming the world system capital into a world of free human beings. And we are relevant to the topic of MGS for open criticism of offensive cyber operations. Right, all 10. The MGS series posits a critique of imperial power with mainstream gaming's culture of militarized masculinity. Metal Gear articulates and amplifies the tension between deathly craft and automated battlefield, between soldier autonomy and engineer subjectivity, between loyalty and line systems, and whose service is activated. Kojima indicates in MGS where I focus more on the presence of unmanned machines. I want people to become aware of the global realities of playing the game and practicing values within the game allows us to better understand what allows neoliberalism to dominate society in the first place and challenge it. Conflict 12. The player is, as a result, comes to find themselves not only learning and practicing monumental values within the game, but also thinking consciously, reflectively about some of the cultural models regarding the world, juxtaposing them with new models that may conflict with and or otherwise related to them in various ways. Video game narratives are embodied in the player's own choices and actions in a way that cannot be in books and movies. Blame investment narrative outcome as a result is high, especially when one considers how the outcome of the game experience is much about striving for valorized outcome as it is the construction and maintenance of ideal self via projective identity. And neoliberalism produces crisis, securitizes them, and militarily lashes out against them. This cycle triggers every impact, terminates indexation, muscle making 10. The logic of growth is driving depletion of hydrocarbon and other natural resources at unprecedented and unsustainable rates, thereby accelerating the human interference with the Earth's climate crises are impacting our ability to sustain global food production. Water shortages and hotter weather are destroying the viability of agriculture. Securitizing global crises then leads to strategies of militarization designed to boost the individual state's resilience to crises through intensification of control mechanisms. The focus is on the development of the most optimal ways of exploiting the natural world to the maximal extent. Neoliberalism has the difficulty viewing the world any other way than rationalist instrumentalist instrumentalist fashion, legitimacy of exploitation of natural resources without limits, and inadvertently subordinating ecological energy, food, and human security to the competitive pressures of the private sector, profit maximization, which systematically erodes this relationship with globalizing insecurity on a massive scale by reducing this destructive state behavior onto a functional instrumental reason. Both approaches rationalize the deeply irrational collective human actions that are destroying the very conditions of our existence, and yield makes disposable those who have nots and makes them socially invisible. 8. Determining forces ever deepening inequality can become the defining feature of neoliberalism. Draconian policies aimed at holding on social state are now matched by an increasing repressive legislation. The outlet of immorality of market freedom is now securitized, is secured through the ongoing immorality of military states that embraces torture, war, and violence as legitimate functions of political sovereignty. Capitalism produces the acute crisis of human waste disposal, and the punishing state cultivates a culture of fear and suspicion towards all others. There's an unleashing of powerful, progressive, symbolic, and corporeal violence against all those individuals and groups who have been other individuals marginalized, are stripped of political significance, and exposed to murderous violence. And status quo political science has failed, and we need to engage in video game criticism and embrace their impact to challenge politics society. Robinson 12. We need to play video games in order to understand the possibility spaces, the rules they create, and then to explore the possibility spaces. If we stop challenge or reject them in our daily lives, games are uniquely persuasive, allowing players an almost unprecedented capacity to explore and question the rules. Political science is not yet systematically engaged with video games. It discontinues the scope of the discipline to make a lasting contribution may well be portrayed. As the study of games has become dominated by a narrow subfield which shapes the perception of both issues. We should study how we should study them, and video games have the ability to change ideologies, representations of the world around us. Robinson 12. The game theory representations of ordinary world that manipulation perspectives of the world they inhabit. Process of experimentation can be used as a metaphor to explore the rules and underpin society as a whole. Games frameworks that designers can use to model complexity and problems facing the world to make them easier for players to comprehend by creating some simulating environment. The player is able to step away and think critically about those problems. They can contain real potential to challenge dominant orthodoxies and ideologies, capacity to challenge the militarization of society. And games go beyond leisure. They can tackle real world problems. Gotta go 11. I want gaming to be something that everyone does because they understand that games can be real solutions to problems, real source of happiness that precede the game's future. Our educational system raising participation, tackling global scale problems like climate change and poverty, augment our most essential human capabilities in order to create this future. Separate things have to happen. We have to overcome the lingering cultural bias against games. We need to build hybrid industries and unconventional partnerships so game researchers can work with engineers and architects and policymakers and executives. We need to form. We open up a new form of persuasion. Video games create social change through misuse, procedural rhetoric. Ghost 7. Video games are considered low art. Game studies are trying to identify and cultivate a similar trend of video games. Video games can open up a new domain for persuasion where persuasion thinks their core representational model procedural rhetoric rather than spoken word writing or images or moving pictures. Video games can also disrupt and change fundamental attitudes and beliefs about the world, leading to potentially significant long-term social change. This power lies in the very way video games not claim through procedural rhetoric. In our procedural approach, allows us to look at the big picture and understand why the systems currently fail. And status quo is just a collection of snapshots being set back and forth. Our road changes that conception of argumentation, but goes to 7. The one usually makes a rhetorical claim precisely to exclude the opposing position. What might object to its underlying model for advertising influence presumes the media of ecology consumer capitalism procedural representations do often allow users to mount procedural objections to consider configurations of system self-reveal arguments do not facilitate the open discourse of the Athenian assembly. They invite others to conform to discourse which interlocutors can engage, consider, and respond in return either via the same medium or different ones. Just an objection and debate would take place through negation and rebuttal of the opponent rather than the construction of opponents. So an objection and procedural artifact may take place in response to a claim of verbal, written, or visual or procedural form. They merely require the interlocutor to construct a new claim in another context. Voting affirmative is a disruption of neoliberalist war power through the embracement of values and Metal Gear Solid world. The affirmative is to change the way the executive engages war. And video games allow us to question the political system, social and cultural practices that need to be used as arguments and practices in debating. But ghost video games are modeled for real machines, and video games don't make arguments about how social and cultural systems work in the world, how they could work or don't work. We can interpret arguments and consider their places in our lives. Video games is kind of literacy that allows us to make a critique of the systems we live in, like political systems or social and cultural practices. We learn to ask questions about the models of such games presents this kind of technology literacies that procedural rhetoric offers is becoming increasingly necessary. Educators should consider adopting video games as artifacts to be discussed, game playing and argumentative and expressive practice alongside debating. And that's good. Last card's not read.
Okay.
I'll delete it.
Ready?
Yeah.
So the first question is why vote F?
Because we've presented a procedural model for debate, and we've presented an example of an instance of where presidential war powers should be reduced and why they should be reduced.
I'm confused about your politics. What's this point of video games? Do we have to play video games?
We have to analyze structures within video games and incorporate them into debates.
Is analyzing video games... Well, why analyze video games?
because they have a few unique things that you don't see in media, books, articles.
When the judge votes F as part of your method of challenging neoliberalism, is he endorsing playing Metal Gear Solid 4?
The judge is endorsing analyzing video games and analyzing procedural rhetoric.
We need to play video games in order to understand the possibilities, spaces, and the rules they create, and then to explore those possibilities and accept, challenge, or reject them in our daily lives. So try again. Does the judge need to play the video game?
The judge does not have to play the video game.
Is he endorsing a model where he does?
Absolutely not. We are endorsing a model where we analyze the video game that we have played.
What is the point?
We are presenting analysis.
Hold on. What is the point of even mentioning that it's a video game? For example, what does Metal Gear Solid 4 accomplish that Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times did not?
What does it accomplish? It creates a new layer of interaction between the when you read a book. If you
don't play it, it doesn't.
When you read a book, you just see arguments and you say, I agree or disagree. When you play a video game...
So you do have to play the video game.
When I play Metal Gear Solid 4, I see...
And the judge hasn't, and I'm asking you, when he votes out...
We're discussing the procedural rhetoric within that video game. That's the point of this debate. We're not talking about whether or not playing that game is good. We're talking about whether or not the messages that you gain while playing that game are good in terms of producing presidential work hours.
What does Metal Gear Solid 4 do that Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times does not?
It creates a new layer of interaction because it shows procedures.
Only if you have been the one that plays it, right? You're trying to explain this game to me, and I've never played this game before. So I'm asking you, as someone explaining the game, what does the message of the game do that Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times does not?
What does Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times say?
Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times is a criticism of capitalism and neoliberalism, and it's from the 1920s.
Okay, what it does is it creates interaction with the system. When I'm talking about it, I'm pointing to procedural artifacts in it.
Your right evidence says, I'm reading.
We don't look at procedural artifacts in books.
He's talking about Kojima, or I'm sorry, what's his name?
Hideo Kojima, the designer of the game.
It says, quote, there's little such as a systemic philosophy. The complexity and heterogeneity enriches the game is far more suggestive of the working out of the contradictions on multiple levels. Those between Kojima's evident fascination with the aesthetics of war and war machines and his revulsion at their consequences. When players play Metal Gear Solid 4, how do you know that they will not just be fascinated with the aesthetics of war? How do you know that they will feel revulsion at the consequences?
They can be. That's the point of playing those games. We argue that the way Metal Gear Solid 4, the way we've read the game, is a commentary against it. A player can choose to support neoliberalism if they want after playing the game too. The idea is that the player gets to choose and see these procedures and act in them. Okay. And that's what's good. Got it.
Let me flash it while you're moving your stuff.
All yours. I'll go around the front instead of the back.
This makes me feel so sure.
You can take one.
Alright, while they're getting that, the order is going to be 3 off and then case. Still waiting together.
Got it. Is it not reading?
No, my computer doesn't like this flash drive. It's having an issue because the thing pops out.
Oh, gotcha. The tricky flash drive, sorry.
Here, how about this? I'll get it and put it on pads.
Yeah.
That'll be a lot faster, I think.
Yeah, you see that
problem. Do y'all mind using this flash drive?
Yeah, that's fine.
It just kind of collapses when I put it on my laptop.
Okay.
Sorry about this. Console.
Should still be just speech.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, that's awesome. Here's this back.
Thanks. I got you.
Alright, we're good.
Good? Alright.
First, these are offense for American interpretation of the resolution requires them to defend the enactment of a topical USFG policy that's Erickson 3. It's something that the USFG and the US federal government and the representatives should put in action the policy action to the government neighbors in violation. They don't defend a topical plan in the direction of the topic and the nexus impacts. A limits. Then when here to the communal topic that leaves one side unprepared, resulting in shallow and uneducational debate, balance, controversy, and key to decision making. This is skills. This is Steinberg and Freely 8. If everyone was agreement, there was no need for a meeting, and then came produce effective decision when I make clear identification of your question and the answer, and do it like that, and I'll leave me perfect for the forms of particular questioning and identification for a line of the recording on its own side of contrary vague. I should give the result and focus the deliberation of the board decision more profitable. It's going to open up to allow those shots in the product of the debate, which facilitates effective decision making, but line spending was on the decision, but it must be banned for the result argument. If we merely take about the level where we have like the evidence or discussion on this obligation based for argument, although we have a general subject, we have not sorted problem it is too broad and B, switch side debate. Only our firm creates a form of education that improves critical thinking and prevents violent dogmatism. This is Olbers and 6. A both thinking and logging is simply awareness of ideas and paying attention to opinions of the wish to hear about rather. They ability to reproduce and critique them. They can produce the preparation to arguments and ability to vary opponent and ethical appreciation of the other position creates an empathy counter towards the politics of annihilation. The different opinions not want to kill babies, but both the beacon and conduct considerable research on the contrary, providing critical training for the adaptation of knowledge in the grassroots situation, emphasizing the engagement with the alterity of the fundamental economic sphere does not increase significant values in the critical thinking, but does not reduce the public talking in the public sphere, and the rational deliberation of the benefits of emotional literacy, both abandoning this law and the two risky fraud, simply they consider giving education given of the continuous nature, and they assume the terrorism from the students can launch up the militarism of the history of Islam, and the European colleges for taking a grain of substance for the politics of annihilation and cut the cords of annihilation and dogmatic decision making cause extinction.
No, skip. Go to the next one.
Okay. Next off. Amazing! A whole new field of resistance has just been revealed to us. All you need to do is spend $300 on a PS3 and spend $60 on Metal Gear Solid 4. Or perhaps not. A game may criticize consumerism and neoliberalism, but nevertheless it will still keep us entertained and tuned in and coming back for more. By the way, Metal Gear Solid 5 is coming out. Please tell me how it will help my crusade for justice. It's Colette and 9. Postmodernity comes our interpretation of the reality of life, awareness of the construction, that's replacement awareness of the meaning, and the postmodern of the shows postmodern concepts of the reconstructing nature of the meaning for its participation in the appearance of things that pastation is the neutral pocket parts of the mimicry and the sentimental humor of the without laughter. Often the version ironically and also despite the fact that it is at the same time keeps
but the direct parts itself is something very important for you.
The turn off the television, but I'm saying this is the same too. But in simulation, with that we are on the giant show, but the being played on the creators of the Simpsons. Manipulative power of television, the show. It's extremely funny. We are seduced by the medium and informed by the idea that we are aware of the seduction, and where there is power, there is resistance, or so the app would like you to believe. Playing a video game to challenge capitalism is just about as useful as wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt to challenge the system. Small gains of power enslave us to a system of inequality. This is Zavazar Day 94. The dogma that the people have the access to power most subtly, unemployed most of the kind, contrary to the Marxist theories of the power in the hands of the powerful, is according to the complicit theory of the power of the weak, power seems to be an over versus the tender by the not reaching such a view of the weak of power, and the post-realization of the reactionary, and the religious quietism and making here and there, the loose restoration of free market capitalism, pulling one step up by the bootstraps, apparently up here, prisoners are seeing empowering themselves to the reading off of the grief design, numbers of walking on the causes of the person mistake for reading one party, with the person manipulating emancipation of the economic of the world. In capitalism, is a system of incalculable debts. You have an ethical obligation to resist this. This is Hirad in 7. We are what they were like to me, but it would be nice to increase of peace can be achieved only through destroying capitalism because
They're saying that video games are
the first one to have the capital invasion of the Americas, millions of Americans who were worked in the slave hundred of poor people were hanging in London, and the enforcement of poverty laws at 20 million were lost in the cell until 1,000 of them were by the Sherman police and their million in the concentration camps and 200 of the thousands of labor after murder in Guatemala. 8.5 million communists were massacred in Indonesia. Millions of enemies were killed by the the French and U.S. capitalists during the decades of colonialism and a major war with capitalists and simply murder those who have been making their rule. Outside reading for the workplace of the United States, although millions of people are dying right now, the more famous during the attributable to capitalism and from disease that prevented by the capitalists. Nearly all poverty related deaths are because of capitalism. We cannot begin to estimate how the sun wastes in the short life of the body of capitalism. Capitalism is not merely these damn murderers, and our alternative is rigorous orthodox analysis of class inequality, grounding the site of political contestation or knowledge outside of labor surplus value merely serve to humanize capital and prevent a transition to a society beyond oppression. This is Tumino in 2001. Effective political theory was no have to offer an integrated understanding of social practice based on the knowledge of production and praxis only the orthodox much that has been able to reason into knowledge of the existence of social totality and providing the precedent leading to building of a free society from necessity and now the free society and actual knowledge and what is always know what makes that existing social totality this inequality cannot be explained by gender, race, and disability, ethnicity, or nationality. All these things all these are secondary practices and modes and numbers when the social inequality is primary on the basis of such secondary contradiction in ways to legitimize capitalism because such arguments authorize capitalism without gender race discrimination unless economic inequality is integral part of human society. They accept the sign of capitalism and beyond capitalism such a society in which one wants to be by nature bourgeoisie and for all capitalism here is the same and the best is the meaning of cruelty is more tolerable. Such an understanding is basically the fundamental understanding of that the wealth is knowledge and labor. Only orthodox Marxism organizes the historicity of labor and primary source of human wealth and the means of theory of the foundation of recognition and other repeat the theological determination of knowledge work and demonstrated social theory. Next up. When choosing how to be, we can choose
That's one case.
Okay. Go to case instead.
Okay.
First, speedrunning old games challenges neoliberalism. Athens commodity fetishism. This is Lemieux and Bollock, 2013. Speedrun was organized dedicated to the creation of speedruns. Speedruns a competitive idea of completing a video games as quickly as possible. So take the subject to its extreme and challenge it over here to show that what video games is it can do. And speedrunning doesn't ensure to play video games without other people applying necessary obstacle to the suddenly variable mechanism entirely invent entirely new minigames and new plays. And by turning video games mechanism and mechanics and new equipment for inventing new player rather than speedrunning are fairly hidden speedrunning rejects one of the agreements that define as the commodities and objects of economic consumption by opting out of the way of new commercial game fighting for the second life based on the recycle of the platforms and video game relation turns the Olympic goal of the publishers to make money and prefer external resistance and the Robinson evidence says they have to play games to achieve the affirmative. This ensures no solvency for the broader public and no guarantee that people will become a part of the narrative. Video games are not universal and rejection of violent graphic rejection of graphic violence warrants and connecting meaningful theory. Actually, skip that card. Last. You want to embrace the values behind Metal Gear Solid 4? Fine. Wrong choice. This game is offensive in its representations of women's body. Here's an example of one scene from the game. This is Fisher Video Game and Review in 2008. A conversation will detail the painfully damaged history of a defeated female boss, but only after we check out her quote tits. And when confronted with overt sexism, the game's creator defends the decision to objectify women as a means to sell more product. This is not only offensive, but turns the ass. This is Fleming in 2013. How there's a fairly common consistent misogyny in video games is a rampant problem that objectifying women is bad for the industry. Don't go looking to Metal Gear Solid creator Kojima for the help on his Twitter feed. Kojima stated that he has told Metal Gear Solid character designed to make characters more erotic than the initial target was to make it more cosplay and figurine sell as well. Not exactly the cutting edge of military tech. Perhaps she's wearing a ballistic underwear. Kojima went on to note that she said she's not too erotic of the character. Why the female sniper and ignoring sexist tendencies is the beginning of proliferation, environmental destruction, domestic violence, and the foundation of war. This is Warren in Caddy 94. The work of the animation in the real life reflects historical male gender assumption including our concerns with the generation with environmental division and violence with women and the logical heteros and patriarchal the environmental crisis war and violence general unpredictable logical consequences which will manifest in behavior and use the ballot to reject the affirmative sexism. This is the only way to do it with the only way to act without recreating and reinforcing patriarchy. This is Kolak and 8. The depoliticization of the struggle and sex operation and the replacement of the struggle with a focus on the personal self-actualization. She would suggest that the men movement should become a segment under the larger feminist movement. I didn't read the last sentence in that part.
Are you familiar with the character Meryl in the Metal Gear Solid series?
No, because I haven't played the game.
Okay, so Meryl is the commander of U.S. armies.
That's fantastic for her.
Okay, she is the opposite of what your evidence is describing as objectification of women. She's a woman in power.
Yeah, that's great. If you're saying that one woman
play as a woman. Okay.
Hold on. If you're gonna say that one woman being in a position of power is gonna make up for the purpose behind the game and the values put behind the game as why to sell the game, that's
Your official
pretty
evidence.
offensive.
Your official evidence talks about the female bosses. Every one of these female bosses come from areas of war where they've been oppressed. They come from areas where they're forced to kill their own families and forced to go through that
So
suffering.
that means we have to sexualize them in order to sell.
No,
them
that means we
right?
need to show their suffering. They're not sexualized. You don't see naked
Sure, you can
women.
argue
You
that,
don't
but
see
that's
naked.
pretty-
Excuse me,
images.
isn't there a I am pretty sure in Metal Gear Solid 4 there is, after you beat the bosses, there's a photo op mode. True or false? Can't you display the models of the characters and then take pictures of them? Is that not a mode in the game?
And then
Yes,
you
it is.
hear
Okay, that's what I thought.
okay, but then you hear the stories behind these women and why those are created, and I feel like those are probably more
You're
important.
never-
Where do your
you're-
authors take these things into account?
Have you ever heard the game Dead or
Yeah,
Alive
they
Beach
do.
Volleyball?
We're talking about Metal Gear Solid 4,
Yeah, I know,
buddy.
it's the same thing.
It's
right?
my cross-sex. Can you please stop asking questions? Let's talk about your Lemio and Bullocks card. Speedrunning. What is it?
Speedrunning is where you try to beat the game as fast as possible. Saying,
Okay.
I don't care what.
There's
the
an achievement in Metal Gear
is.
Solid 4 to beat the game in 5 hours. Why is it not the same thing?
This card is in the context of speedrunning old video games to challenge the commodification of new video games.
Okay, so what the heck is this challenging? Why is this saying the app's a bad idea?
It's the argument in this card listing makes is that new video games are commercialized, and that rather than buying into a system.
Okay, let's talk about commercialization of video games. So, Microsoft tried to release new constraints on consumers, and they failed miserably and had to roll back on every new change they made. Why is it to show that the video game community has control over the industry?
Whoa, wait. First of all, I don't see a purpose to your question. First of all, the second point is that you're talking about how the broader public rejected the changes, which means they probably don't have a control.
And also on that note, Anita Sarkarzian made a video game podcast explaining how there was sexism in video games, and you're right, the video game public said.
I did not ask a question about that. Why are you talking about
Because
that?
it's correlated
Is this
to
your
your example
speech?
of the video game public.
Let's go to your framework debate.
Yeah.
So, your interpretation, 1, how do you meet your Steinberg and Freely evidence? 2, your Olbrist evidence talks about an anti-abortion
You can't
student.
meet the Steinberg and Freely evidence in a world where you're just standing up and
I asked how do you meet it?
Hey,
I have a better question
possible.
though. Can we talk about your Olbrist evidence?
Yeah, sure.
It talks about an anti-abortion student cannot simply declare the opposition, I want to kill babies. Both would have to conduct considerable research to talk about the contrary claim. Is that us?
Debate behind you. Yeah, of course.
Really? Don't think so.
We'll take right.
Okay, so this sexism stuff. Ownership shows different things. 2 yellow bellows. 3. This objectification doesn't take into account strong characters that you view in the game. Meryl. All of these instances of objectification have a sorry,
This card's actually
okay. 4, all these instances of objectification have a purpose. Like they show these women broken. The reason why they're not killed is because they're so broken in their lives and have been through so much suffering that you have to understand. That's what you see in the procedures of the video game. Whoa. Okay, that's back.
That's basically what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Just make a picture of myself. They just want. Yeah, I put a resolve, the SFG, and should cover that. Decay. Look what I got.
Okay.
We can solve that. We just beyond Halo goals.
Yeah.
This is more we solve stuff. This is analysis from the running card. And then this.
Yeah, internal yeah. The argument is that the internal contradictions, yes, they exist, but it's the best
They're
shot, and that's what the diary work itself talks about. Framework, you shouldn't spend as much time as you did last round. You said the impact during decision making. Don't read some stuff.
They
Just say we need this. And
I'll just
go in the direction of the topic.
just do that. I have. What do you need to read them? Like micropolitical discourse.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think I'm gonna do all this crap. I already said it.
Yeah.
Spectatorship.
Yeah. Okay. And this card. It's in the games in the first section. For what?
Okay.
Yes.
Let's throw it out. Let's throw it out.
Oh, you said perm, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Got a couple thumbs.
That's like the easiest one.
What about color on the bottom? Okay. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Alright, stop rep. It's being sent to pads.
648.
Sweet. Yeah, it's up there. So whenever.
Hey, can we take a second back? Would that be okay?
I can't. I have to be plugged in. Otherwise, I blue screen. So.
Oh, let's switch
Alright.
seats then.
Stop time. 10 seconds. Thank you.
Card that makes you closer to the light.
Sorry, my computer blue screen. It's not plugged in.
No worries.
Or you can just use my charger.
You know what?
Must-
We've already gotten this. We're here. Okay.
We're here?
It's gonna go framework case K. You got all your flow? You're happy?
I got a bunch of paper.
Same difference.
Framework. Okay.
Case kit.
Case K.
Oh, one second. I have to pull it up off the website. Sorry.
It's all good. I'm super.
Alright, I got this.
What? No. Go back to the thing.
If you want me to flash it to you, I can do it too. But it's up there.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
You guys got it?
Solid.
Both of you got it?
Yeah, sorry, 1 second. Yes, I do.
Go.
Right.
When we meet the viewer in the direction on topic, we endorse the game that discusses the nature of offensive cyber operations and drones to disrupt the way the executive engages war. The sprite intent from the 180 counter-interpretation individuals can just for USFG's war policy, executive war powers, all the negative definitions about the question of war role, and the resolution which comes before policy role, the balance endorse the team of best advanced procedure, and debate. And Redmond 12 indicates that image discourse laws of Nilo has become a hegemonic mode discourse that only being covered the way we understand the world. It gets laws of break of the planetary person, house of Nilo, and also politics via the force of the students thing, and or any way that will disrupt the ability of individual agents to teach us to deal with problems through images, lenses, and approach policy through the same problem and related problems of force such an individual influence and inevitable clear define the 1 system 2 AC moving target status quo education is back and post and Bongos indicates our status quo for this special field representing complex models that let's fail to truly solve problems use more complex models we made it to be sensible around as well indicates without the core video games in our political discussion we fail to examine the rules of every politics ideas whole debate isn't persuasive because pure verbal arguments and not how we find arguments isn't persuasive everyone is this about one of the Bongos from 1 AC status quo creates false education doesn't force you to understand why certain things are true as again one of the brain eyes smart less your home nuclear reactor actually worse or model simulation force you to understand how subworks and debates will explain engineering video ways of knowledge result and on the definition results of reduced by mental analysis ran house 11 should indicate desirability OED 11 USFG is the people power 2005 the government is the people if a government because it's the people but maybe you're replaced and for first substantive impact the argument is precursors from the quality of the ground they lose ground so proponents prefer for those to useless discussion and their ground and we are advocates to remove limits or arbitrary the names always going to want more and so with the from we lose limits so they get to argue set to strategy good unpredictability stable we lose positive set up to advantage right towards ground produce ability to be caught up reasonably the question of who's interprets best but who's but just the absent interpretation make it impossible for the negative current political discourse fails. Only video games use as a procedure, rhetorical laws, the best logos for discussion, political discussion, August 6. The central role to consider policies for breathing life and otherwise make our political discourse restriction necessary because it does allow us to link just favors nature of the public little person on the broken subject of country that not right rubble and written political intelligence stops most people don't even know that they have a conceptual system to represent most promising future political role of video games will serve helps us to take on process that complex video games are really media mass of the across age and regards to social and represents rely on consumer friend or workers of the political interests of definitive components. Some video games remain independent about their political bent. Video games might offer the most salient logos for discussion how we might think about political problems. We don't really on the decision making. We don't really decision making. We make it better. We become better decision making as we get the full picture instead of having to make to make decision and decisions on snapshots. And video games are better for decision making. They get to be involved in simulation decisions instead of the spectators while voting will same until get 2013. The complaints of able to board for mission decision making. Even simulating the video game will tend to include far more detail than ever. The thought experience video games allow players that kind of result in thought experience as engaged rather than in this center perspective. They still simulate thoughts and metaphysical calculations. Allows players video games like experiments at death. This is making actually really high proposing custom better. They still show the switch side debate how switch side we are switch side we do on Sunday and switch side assumes that the debate politically neutral and produces default responses to parents. The agency the affirmation of force of research self-testing ideas which ideas and only have to have it up under debate until it fails because you have to research both sides. Or you can debate both sides which is where they will read the same argument after read the way they will still be able to read our hand the nay and read theory or they will have to research the cane after on the case. On the speedrun argument for something from speedrun, we can do speedruns on new games, including MGS and MGS, the most significant mainstream game that have a successful and consistent anti-militarization message to society. It's the most successful in Yellowstone Robinson's 12 Metal Gear Solid illustrates the importance of procedure returning combining both the political mode of gameplay reforms rather than competence and messaging ensure the capacity power to corrupt the highest echelon of government that the dangerous power of military industrial competences and anti-war messages reflected in terms of gameplay towards the player who use that to avoid conflict games and to contain the definitive challenge of the power of military entertainment gobbles and militarization society MGS is the only mainstream critical ministers to use such consistent procedural towards the evidence really good at indicating how the MGS is the only game that consistently uses procedural rhetoric. The only game they'll be able to meet are rolled about, and they say that they're out to make money. However, they are not out to make money. Or I'll get to this later on a piece of evidence about the maker of the game that says that isn't actually out to make money. He's out there to send a message on the fan arguments. They are totally overestimating type of situation using first time delivers outweighs the arguments that are mostly at 2010 evidence indicates that infinite growth is going to cause extinction. And secondly, is that we are also getting access to value life impacts the year on 2008 evidence because people are viewed as politically invisible, which means we're going to outweigh any of their arguments. And MGS4 is one of the best video games and doesn't actually the best video games to actually recognize the feminine body and maybe not a feminine body in a respectful way. Urban 12, one of the most preserved aspects of MGS has been his plethora of strong will and intrigue. You feel like here to combine those inclusive and cosmopolitan attitude towards sexuality. No other video game approach is still consistently queer. So mainstream characters are also openly acknowledging sex relation and multisexuality in the overall narrative framework. MGS4 there is a genuine and gender equity in the ranks of the protagonists as well as on the antagonist males now. Tuffing Cable is squad member while the elite troops liquid also is private are the Frogton is entirely a female soldier. Soldiers are also here to expand to include children and the elderly. And Remen 12 from the 1AC indicates that the games borrow respectively from numerous post-colonial nations, their respective media cultural critique and the neo-colonials that disrupt and negate the stereotypes of national race and sexual gender with their respective game before they provide for deconstruct those same way as some future realm transnational citizens and migrant military and objectification for a purpose to show and understand the violence that these people have been through and the structure of their arguments undermines feminism. They claim this singly results in a bigger cause impact and marginalized struggles against other forms of violence and discrimination. Correction 2002 students rather than feminist authors import the renounce of resolutions just as arguments can only exemplify their general absence. Some cause reasons debate on debaters and negate the welfare topic argued that the state of welfare system is key issue rather which feminist moves out of the department. Also, the point is a single welfare grounds for all forms of oppression reduction argument to the third flag and unwillingness to debate about the complexity of human motivation and explanation of the result of ignorance of the sort of position on the part of the feminists or the authority progressive arguments arousal arguments about feminism intercollegiate debate saying to be overdetermined by expectation to common practice and onto the K.
Oh, also, just like neolib outweighs this.
Yeah, I already did the. Already said
Okay.
neolib outweighs.
Even there's bad parts of procedure, you just weigh them.
Even if there's bad parts of our procedure, you're going to weigh them against each other. First alternative, both thought experience allow the examination of important philosophical questions. Chilsky 2013. Thought experiences are useful because they serve as an active model of more complex thought experience can be used to challenge the theory by identifying basic non-existent fundamental error theory. So it has been active and interchanged as thought experience can model situation that may be unstable using an empirical method. Thought experience are much less nature than real world experience. They are likely traits of thought experience, but similar to video games introduce additional tools for academics and reading simulation fevers. Key to match alternatively neoliberalism, direwolf for innovative 2009 games. Code neoliberalism such as 50 course engagement players with the visual global family and revolution promises the structure of the world marketing already than not the military
strategies, combos of war, simulation tools, welcome development, and some of the cases, started division, alter procedure, critical division, discussion of the alteration to often, or rights and issue planning requirements like a board, how about the table tracks with all unfit America, the deal, era, tends to race, social planning, the project counter, empire, reform, more attention to issue, personality, government, long-term planning, even though you divisions, your team is radical policies, could contribute to this pedagogical quality of the game is simulation favor, which players question the premise of a program virtual world. If you could just get everyone to be a little more where you have to defeat the back in the course of the world's gaming can be incredibly powerful negative for steering the system. Perm do the plan and all non-competitive parts of the alternative. Perm do the plan and do the alternative every other instance. Double plan. Either the alternative is enough to overcome the affirmative or not enough to overcome the status quo. And analyzing procedures beyond the affirmative simulation is key to understand contradiction, engage in criticism, and solve. I'll go 7. Video games have to escape advertising gluts or new media carry the commercial messages and mind always undermine the very parts of advertising. Again, I also expose the very reality of Disneyland, making them clean market less of external to the more of a representational one. The dissonance between the virtual and real Disneyland actually exposes a similar dissonance between Disneyland and the real world. And the media video games advertising pervades them and partly lead to its creating. And there's a net benefit to the affirmative. We were able to solve neo-colonial wars. That was Redmond 212 from the 1AC, indicating that we're actually go and solve more than neoliberalism can solve. It's more than their can. And Redmond 12 from the 1AC indicates that video games allow us to break loose from the planetary prison house of neoliberalism and to glimpse of the possibility, no matter how faint or transient, of transferring the world system capital into a world of free human beings. And Kojima has utilized the internal contradiction views in the transnational market to take down the system. Redmond indicates that the video game can be used as a point of content station between the system and the people to be able to rebel and analyze the internal contradiction. The power of the digital commons is just becoming realized, and only by utilizing procedural rhetoric can we take down the system. Now, evidence from the 1AC and the alternative is the best way to question the affirmative is the best way to question neoliberalism within debate. Mobilizer Game creates a forum for planning our next step. Diary with her in Depoter 2009. World Society Game explores our ecosynthetification, global capital, game culture is crystallized by dissenting influences from hacking, counter globalization, war resistant, ecological active in the game tend to be radical. Multitudinous forms of capital is a good exemplar of this process. The empire is the door that swings both ways and be included in culture of system. The system simulates self-organized, cooperative, reducing hacker players capable of looking at the future beyond the edge of the global market. Issues the empire decidedly, and the life and death system probably started between which people recreate themselves in spite of the duelist game, or now recreation produced across the planet by billions for virtual games, a revolution like the minds of the metaverse. And
go back to the case debate. On the sexualization argument, the fact that there's published articles about whether or not these women are objectified proves that there's
published articles about these approved.
Whether or not people, it proves that procedural conversations and conversations about the video game are making us more aware about these issues.
It proves that procedural rhetoric within these games has caused us to be able to recognize and see the things that exist within the game, and people are talking about it, which gives us
Arbogast evidence points this to success of the video game. Meaning that their evidence...
This allows the success of the game.
Meaning those discussions are good.
Which means the discussions are good.
And we lead to those.
Alright, you good?
Yeah.
Cool, so let's talk about the case flow. Okay, what makes it so much better that, say there's one or two female characters in the game that are like, yay, we're in a position of power, what makes that a justification?
Okay.
I don't care. What makes that a justification for sexualizing a woman's body in other places in the game?
I'm sorry, that's a loaded question.
One,
you're assuming areas where Meryl's not as important as a character, even though she's a main character of the Resistance. And probably a bigger focus in the boss fights in that last moment after the boss fight, which you have the option of skipping.
How about I change up the question a little bit? What makes the fact that there's a couple female characters?
Again, more than that, but okay.
It makes discussion. It creates discussions about those things. The fact that articles are published, people are looking at the rhetoric of the game.
Let's talk about your advocacy real quick. One AC advocacy was to accept and embrace the values provided by Metal Gear Solid 4. Do you embrace all of the values, or you separate part of your advocacy?
Again, loaded question. We look at... Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
I mean, we're going to analyze the procedural rhetoric that exists within the game.
Hold on, I'm asking you, are you sticking to your advocacy? Do you embrace the values present in Metal Gear Solid 4?
I think his response sticks to the advocacy.
Yeah, that was the advocacy.
I'm asking, are you sticking to it?
What I just said, you'll stick to, yes.
Okay, that's fine. On capitalism. Let's talk about the video games. So you're talking about why they're not made for money and everything like that. Do you have to continually keep buying video games, updating your systems in order to get this new revolutionary form of resistance?
I mean, technically, no.
Technically, no. So I played Pac-Man once. Does that mean I'm good ready to go.
What procedural
touching
rhetoric
Yeah,
did you gain from
Bogos-
that?
Yeah, Bogos would definitely not support Pac-Man as a way to create any type of change in the world.
So is it just Metal Gear Solid 4?
I mean, no.
Wait,
I'm asking.
Bogos has discussed multiple.
sorry,
ways.
what's procedural rhetoric?
Procedural rhetoric is the examination of the processes that come behind computation and simulations.
So, give me an example.
Metal Gear Solid 4.
When you are making the decision to objectify a woman, you're actively making it in those scenes where you're taking the pictures and doing the photo scene. That's an area of procedural rhetoric that you analyze.
So, it's the player's interaction with the video game outside of the format of
what
the game?
what the player understands from that video game, yes.
Okay. And do you make a stance on good instances of procedural rhetoric, or just procedural rhetoric is good?
We think we should analyze it as a whole within games.
Okay, so
And
how
all of
do
our
you-
evidence indicates that there's pretty positive.
How do you analyze a game?
What do you mean?
I'm asking, what is the process you go to analyze a video game and analyze the underlying assumptions?
We look at the player interaction with it, how we interacted when we were playing the game,
Cool.
how Redmond interacted when he was playing the game. He made his dissertation.
Can you move the tubs for me?
Yeah, let's do
Not
lots
fifty.
of-
Thank you.
Do you want to?
I'll just stay like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
You take care of these things. I'm gonna start. I think I know what you're gonna focus on. So. Okay, water. Thank you. Let's take care of this.
It's convenient.
Yeah, we can take care of this, but I don't think it's gonna be an issue. Yeah, this is a good card. This part, I highlighted
Okay,
it.
good. Good job.
I noticed that you were reading more of this because I was going to tell you to read, and this is another huge part of it, which I'll talk about.
I should have
Oh, sorry, here, you can have it back. I mean, you kind of went off of mine, so. Asking for scholarship. feminism in this. It's terrible. One of them is like, we have a conversation. The other's the stuff about Quiet in the new game, who's very scantily clad. Yeah, it's a review. Like,
I'm pretty sure it's probably just this language of video game community.
it's from avclub.com. Thankfully, the many hours of storytelling can be skipped to get to the playable game. Excellent. Oh, we can make some arguments.
Stop it. 6 minutes. Can I get the flash drive you want me to use? Thank you.
Yes.
Speech truancy. It'll be framework and then cap. Ooh, oopsies.
Here we are, I think. 2 p.m.
It's Trinity, so yes.
But, sorry, I didn't do date. Yeah, that's the right one.
Alright. Ready? Alright. Forever not going to concede that we meet argument. There's not an alternative voting issue here. All or procedural argument was to say that you were in the discussion of the resolution and in that topical discussion as a baseline for having a discussion there. Where all the battle argument will be implicitly answered on the criticism of drop to the bogus and Schultz evidence. They cannot access both of these pieces of evidence as often. Since evidence is in the context of literally playing the video game and actually those decision making skills. Crossix is the one as he proves that voting for affirmative is not endorsing a model where you actually play the decision we actually play the video game. They're voting affirmative means you're endorsing their particular reading of Metal Gear Solid, which means they can't access any of their arguments of video games as a potential for politics because their political strategy is not that people should play video games, it's that we should talk about those video games. Now, the criticism of proper impact calculus overview capitalism has resulted in hundreds of millions of deaths or hard evidence is the best historical look at how capitalism continues. These oppressive body counts today, millions of Africans were working at the slaves, hundreds of poor ran no longer to enforce property laws, 20 million were lost in gulags, half a million communists were massacred in Indonesia, millions of Vietnamese were killed by the French United capitalists, thousands die every day in the United Place workplace from negligence on the fault of companies. Our evidence-based comparative claim that we can't even begin to predict the yes, that is just a guess. That is just a shot. And the dark criticism we massively outweigh in terms of magnitude, and probably because those forms of death are happening now. We all throw away their value to life criticism because your value to life, that sounds great for you, but what does it mean? Or hundreds of thousands of people that are dying every day from the massive starvation brought on by the capitalist wealth and inequalities. The impact debate is entirely goes in our favor. Capitalism is a prerequisite also to neoliberalism because you need an economy proper before you can have a model of corporatism, which is what their evidence is criticized, which means necessarily our impact also turns the affirmative or at least alternative solves the case. All we need to win is a risk of the link debate to win this debate, or a risk of alternative solves to prove that it's try or die for the negative. Now, the line-by-line debate. First, they say this permutation debate. You should group all the perms right at the top, but I will answer the simulation argument first. We are already existing in a simulation. It is called life. You can look all around. You can look all around us. There are alternatives that are envisioned of possibilities to exist in a world without capitalism. Things like workers' communes. Naomi Klein wrote a movie called she didn't write a movie. She directed a movie into how the take where workers in South America took over their factory and then ran it as a commune. I will do my alternative analysis here. Our piece of social evidence says we need to view society in terms of the social totality. You cannot look at a snapshot into society, which is what the affirmative does. I.e., we can look at video games and from those video games, extract outward, be able to explain neoliberalism. Rather, you have to look at society as a whole and understand that it is a form of class domination and the contradictions between labor, capital, and the working class. Labor, capital, and the working class, as well as resources that allows for the formation of society proper. They have dropped a superstructure argument, which is that culture comes after the economic base, because the economic base creates both the conditions for that culture to be produced, but also the cultural apparatus is always done to subsume, or is usually done to subsume and to protect that economic base, which is our argument of ideology. The alternative is the only way to challenge capitalism because it renders itself as a constant criticism of the social totality of the system proper, which is key to organizing ourselves politically. Now, I will do link notes proper. Every link we win is a dissent to the permutation because it proves that the affirmative method is incongruent with the alternative, and also that is simply a bad sign. Our first link is our piece of cold lot of evidence. The affirmative repeats the culmination of postmodern irony and satire. There's something funny about an affirmative that claims that you should buy a video game in order to challenge consumerism. Just as it's funny to say that an action-oriented RPG like Metal Gear Solid, when playing that game, is the best way to challenge things like U.S. militarism. Our piece of cold lot of evidence that gets this is the postmodern irony. The same way that you can sit at your TV and watch episodes of The Simpsons or The South Park, and while they make fun of the fact that you're actually sitting there watching them, we are already recognize that we're part of the joke, but we're still willing to play it. The impact is pure passivity, where we play the video game, but we don't take that knowledge and export it out. Where this takes out their internal link to the procedural rhetoric argument, because it means that gamers, when they read the game and play the game, there are two ways of reading it. The consequences don't want to see you prove that you can read the game as Kojima does, as see the consequences of warfare, or you can read the game as an absurd setting for a celebration of violence. This means that this dual reading is incongruent with our alternative. It says there is one reading of history, which is class struggle, which is the universal truth of society proper. Ms. R75, true universal economic without coming, the antagonistic contradictions of capital and relationships in which individuals are dominated, compulsions can be linked to the beauty from impressive local stories through Thomas Virtue, on its gun ontological condition, the human race, the kind of hard-to-live individuals disappears, as the objective reality of antagonistic social relations, productive relationships between particular working subject must be mediated, and every conceivable form of society was the accurate totality of the individual's history can never coalesce into a sustainable social whole. The point is, as a result of the historically generated and changeable division of labor, that individuals are mediated with themselves against an antagonistic social structure, which is now a systems of production. The second link is setting the bar so low you trip over yourself. As Zardav's evidence indicates that the affirmative is the worst form of cultural analysis and challenging capitalism. The idea that we're playing video games is the same as organizing ourselves politically, getting guns, and challenging the bourgeoisie is terrible. It gives the example of when Foucault talked about when there's power and resistance. Foucault said it was great that prisoners were writing messages to each other and reading out loud chapters of his book, but Zardav says, no, it's awful. That's not a real form of resistance because they're still locked in prison. How can you miss that part? When you're playing a video game, you are not engaging in revolutionary struggle. You are entertaining yourself and enjoying yourself in that process. There's no incentive for you after they're playing a video game to branch out and incentive to other people. Video games are worthless without playing them. Otherwise, they are just explaining Metal Gear Solid to you. At this point, they're reading of Metal Gear Solid 5 that rejects neoliberalism. Congratulations. Please tell me how you will organize your politics to challenge neoliberalism. It's not sufficient to have a reading of a text. This is a tried and tired method that doesn't produce any real change. Here are a ton of movies in my recent memory that are anti-neoliberal. Blood Diamond, Modern Times, Elysium, Wall Street, for Pete's sakes. Cultural analysis cannot act as a vehicle for resistance. It claims you overthrow hierarchies while all it really does is invert it. It attaches itself to the object. This is why they're reading of Metal Gear Solid 4, even though in the game itself it says, oh my god, look how awful poverty it does. It does that so you will buy the game, which means it uses poverty as an object incentivize you to buy into a system of class oppression. Gitlin and 97 cultural studies often claim they've overthrown the hierarchy, but they actually does is inverted cultural studies or Chavez they were serving the culture, sensing hegemonic importance of cultural practices, and pointing their potential for resistance to musical style or against the hegemonic nature of hegemony is definitely tautological. The cultural regime is hegemonic from the ruling group, and that our culture is resistant in the firm of the group. Sure, because of the race, ethnicity, and so often marginalized, the resistant process of labeling is essentially because it's predetermined whether a particular group is hegemonic or resistant culture and singing their songs at the same time singing their prayers. However unfavorable the balance of potential forces political, seated and living their lives now, the politics is central, and this regarded central, the cultural, the politics, economic resources, the political is supported by a false consciousness premise in which the analytical assumption is that what holds the ruling groups in power is the capacity to muffle or destroy contrary tendencies of emotional nature. Class inequality may have soared, the conditions of life that may have worsened, racial tensions may have mounted, social democratic parties may have weakened, but never mind, attend to culture, and one need not dwell on unpleasant realities, one need not be rigorous about what an opposes and what one places is capitalism, the struggle is the patriarchy, racism, anti-democracy. Practitioners are frequently loosely speaking cavalry, the opposition or resistance cultivates a thinking that is impossible to remain left without having to face the more difficult questions of political self-identification. Reinforces the current reinforces the current. I'm going to skip that word because of ableist rhetoric. Unconventional politics is mostly fragmented and self-contained along God's identity, and social politics that feel this presumption, attempting to legitimize the axis of the movement that confirms the collective withdrawal. The democratic coups, ableistic cultural studies would practice to give self-political practitioners practices would should see more critical world remains to be researched and changed. We'll learn more about politics, economy, and society in the process. Probably a better what do not accomplish, do not wish to be politics. Let us organize coalitions. Let us do politics. Let's not think that our academic work is really that. Now, they say from non-competitive parts. I think I've already explained why the alternative is competitive with the one I see both in our reading of history and as well as our reading of truth. They say perm other instances of double blind. Well, here's a perm for other. It says permutation. You should vote for the affirmative in every other round but this one. They need a specific reason why this round is key. This also proves why this permutation is intrinsic because we're only given one access. You want to see permutations are our voting issue because it's possible for the negative generate offense. So read this piece of bogus evidence about analyzing this evidence in the context of playing a game in Disneyland about Disneyland. I don't know why this applies to our criticism. You want to understand the contradictions in society? All you need to do is go to a factory to see the contradictions that are inherent in capitalism. You don't need to go into a fantasy verse to understand contradictions. That is entire art. This is our argument of escaping reality through culture, which I already said about. They say that they are better able to do stuff already. They say that they are more keyed in the K. I'm not quite sure if that means I've already done the alternative analysis here. They don't have a real indictment of the cultural study method of the 1AC, nor is there a challenge to social organization, which is key to break down capitalism, which means it is try or die for the negative. They read this piece of pointer evidence about video games, keep mobilized people. This is irrelevant. This is irrelevant because they have already conceded that they do not. All really they're endorsing is a particular access of reading video games, which means that they can't access the positive parts of that video game because the video game can be read by multiple ways and different reasons, by different people. They say that video games allow us to confront the digital commons. The commons have already been contested. You don't have to go to the digital commons. It's here. It's right now. This is the revolution. Or this is where the revolution should happen, not in cyberspace. Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right. What happens, according to alternative, after you get the ballot?
Well, our Tolmino evidence is not about debate spaces, but our argument is that voting negative means you endorse a broader analysis of society, history, the progressions of society, an understanding
of
the
analysis.
Well, it's the proper term is orthodox Marxism.
What does that actually entail in the comparison to the
So, in the context of the way it relates to the app, it means you see the economic base of society as the starting point for revolutionary activity rather than the cultural sphere, which is what the affirmative examines. Because this is Marx's argument about superstructures and bases, right? The best way to explain it is if you want to take out a fire, you don't clear away the smoke, right? You destroy the fire itself. Our point is that Marx says the economic base is the foundation for society, in which things like politics, culture, law, religion, all those things emerge out of an economic base between proletariat and bourgeoisie. But those cultural studies are not in of themselves isolated, right? They are linked to the economic base in both their products of it, but also their ideologies made to protect that economic base.
Yeah, how does the negative actually achieve getting rid of this base?
Our argument is you should focus on getting rid of that base. In the same way that you do not structurally, physically achieve getting rid of neoliberalism, which we say is a cultural product of the economic base, we say that the focus should be spent trying to challenge the economic base itself. There's plenty of examples of people doing this, right? I gave an example of the 2NC about how Naomi Klein made a movie about The Take, which highlighted these workers in Guatemala who, when they were confronted with the prospect of losing their factory, they literally overran the factory, kicked out the owner, and they organized it as a commune where they set the terms of who gets paid what money, how much do we work for, etc. That's an example of changing, right, the superstructure, which is things like democracy, access to education, access to welfare, by challenging unequal access to resources, which is the economic base.
Have you been to that factory?
What?
Have you interacted with that factory of the workers?
Have I personally been to the factory in Guatemala? No.
How do people interact with factories that they've never been to?
Usually trade.
Okay.
I don't.
Point of my question is, how is that interaction matched by the interaction that's created in games?
Well, because you can feel real empathy for those people instead of feeling empathy.
Really?
For,
you read about it, you
yes,
say,
I can
oh,
feel,
that's sad.
Yes, no, I read about it and I'm like, oh my goodness, people are actually dying, as opposed to playing a video game where I'm like playing Grand Theft Auto 5 and I just like curb stomp everyone because it's just a game, right?
Okay, that's not what Begos calls a persuasive game, but that's something we can talk about if you want to bring it into the debate.
I have no real care for what you call a persuasive game and not persuasive game. It's all cultural studies to me, honestly.
Really? Because all of
Yes.
your evidence is in context of books and other media, right?
It's in the context of cultural studies. It's
Which
written
is
in 97.
all of your
so
analysis
there were
in the
video
context
games
of
then,
books.
but they weren't very developed.
Sure.
It still applies to you.
I think we read some distinctions.
One second, prep. Can you read this last card? Yeah. It's in my tune C. It's saved in the Dropbox. Red Critique 6. It's the last card in the Dropbox. Okay?
Just want to read it.
Yeah, sure. Well, no. Yeah, okay. All right, stop prep. 13. What should we have left?
Me, I don't have 13 in the account. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
339.
Thank you.
Did we have 648? Is that what we had?
Yes, that's correct.
Sweet.
Let me just pull this up, sorry. One in there. Yeah, so it's just this card.
The other two are being used by the other setup.
Okay. Here.
Why
Why don't we put it on top of your computer?
I wouldn't put two computers on top of each other. I've seen
I'll
two
just hold
computers
it.
being broken at the same time because of that.
You think so? Now we got this.
Okay, just saying Chattahoochee broke both their computers round one of Wake Forest doing that.
Really?
Yes.
Don't hit it.
Is everyone good?
Be super careful with those
Can
table
you give me
toads.
like 1 second to pull it up?
Yeah.
I won't take more.
You have to hit it over here, page down.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotcha.
The order is going to be the cap K followed by case. Is everyone good? Cool.
Their leftist culture critique is a diversion from serious class analysis. They reduce class to inequality instead of a structural antagonism between labor and capital at the point of reduction. This is red critique in 6. The news of the left then grows wise and and military militancy and become a faith-based network of hospitality, hitting away on with everyone has to turn opportunism run away with the left. Left used to be radical, but radical means grasping at things. How the root culture was a way of knowing and not avoiding the cost of dynamics of capitalism. Now culture critique has been a diversion from class, and class itself has been turned into a trope of opportunism and the conciliation idiom of the left classes has come from the meaning of nothing from other than lifestyle culture is persistent. Some of the social inequalities are not the root cause of the question that has to be dealt with at the point of production. The question of the ethics of the distribution, which is a really trouble for consumption and suppressing the effects of power. These unforeseen results of power caused by the proliferation of signifiers is what is Roe celebrates as the persistent inequalities which he regarded to the lack effective lack of a discourse of firm democracy and non-inflicted effect of the discourse. The cultural and Roe's writings is globalization and the shifting spread of symbolic confrontation with understanding of culture as they become with capitalism and in turns culture into self-entity free for class. When the left talks about capitalism, it actually means anti-corporatism. There is no problem with capitalism itself, and on to the case flow. For First, there's you can look to the first argument that Metal Gear Solid is a great game, but first their solvency is going to fail on 3 levels. First, not everyone can afford the game. That ensures that oppressed populations never get to engage in the resistance that the affirmative wants to. That turns the affirmative and means that only the alternative is going to solve in the critique. And 2, not everyone supports games. This means that the resistance will be stifled not by neoliberalists, but by the population that you want to resist for different various reasons. Otherwise, different parents will reject their kids playing video games on the basis of violence or even money cost. And 3, not everyone has played or will play video games. This means that resistance is never spread and takes out solvency. Specifically, you can look at their Robinson evidence from the 1AC. It specifically says that we have to play the video games in order to feel the pain and engage in the revolution, which means they fail. And next, they say it's not to make money, but I call BS. Welcome to capitalism. This is a gut check. You really think Kojima makes video games because he hates neoliberalism? Nah. That extend our Fleming 13 card that he posted on Kojima's Twitter, that the goal of the Metal Gear Solid was to sell. This is a full turn on solvency when the app forces people to constantly reify their support for broken economics practices by having to actually buy the games. And now let's get to the sexism arguments. First, they say we're overestimating, but the cutscenes explicitly focus in on women breasts. If that isn't classy, then I don't know what is. That's the Fisher evidence. And 2, Kojima put in the sexualization of women for the sole purpose of appealing to the sexism inherent in civil society, also for the product to be sold. That turns the affirmative, and that's also the Fleming 13 evidence. And group the neoliberal analysis, the clock, when it's the evidence says that allowing any instance of sexist value to slip through allows inequality to seep in every facet of our life, which has 3 implications. First, any risk of a solvency deficit means that they can't weigh the neoliberalism impacts against us. And 2, this is an in-round debate-based impact. The AF is passively accepting sexism. They embrace Metal Gear Solid for the value which they inherit in those values is the sexism is the sexualization of the feminine body. Also, the third implication is that they can never get any discursive solvency for neoliberalism in a world where they're just complicit in the same evil as with the oppression. And also, they say Metal Gear Solid recognize the feminine body, but first, it recognizes the feminine body already, but it only sexualizes the feminine body. It doesn't recognize the empowerment of women. Also, you can group the extra term that there is gender equality in the game, but just because one or a couple of women are in position of power does not make the sexualization of other women acceptable. This is the logic of hypermasculine sexuality in the status quo. They like to say that they're the heroes in this game because there are women in power, but they just allow other instances to go on as justified and all right, which is going to turn the affirmative. And also, they say this objectification is for purpose, but what the hell does that mean? It shows the violence that they have been put through. We can recognize the violence that women have been put through by displaying them as pieces of meat. Specifically, that you can look into the context of Metal Gear Solid, that after boss fights, you have a photo shoot for women, and it's specifically used for taking pictures of the sexualized bodies that the game producers have made. And also, they say the structure our structure undermines feminism, but it's not that you are the root cause of war in your own self. It's that you are part of the flawed status quo, and you are the part of the flawed assumptions on the feminine body. And next, they say that just because articles have been published on the issues means that it challenges ideas, but no, that's a bunch of angry fanboys because people are starting to call out the sexism inherent in the game that they're talking about. Just because people write about it does not mean that the game challenges. And also, sexuality has its place, but the use of sex in this video game is exploitive. That's game politics in 13. Objectification and sexism. Sexuality can be used for a person in the video game, but in this particular case, the emphasis on lazy exploitation. And once sexism devalues the feminine, it can't be brought back. It is vulnerable and otherized. You can extend the warning in Caddy 94 that in a world where we just pass off different instances of sexualization and sexist tendencies, it lies the groundwork for other kinds of oppression. Specifically, you can look to proliferation of environmental destruction because we have to take a hyper-masculine approach of we are the masters of this domain, and they fall into that logic and they don't challenge this impact, which means we get full weight. And also, it is the very discourse of this debate round that functions to map out logistics of domination and solves oppression and enable resistance. Is Cuomo in 2. Talk of the logic and the domination of identifying the values embedded in the culture and unjust hybrids and mapping out the effects of such hybrids in the logic of cultural politics of the moral philosophy. It is true because the different forms of exploitation and domination are connected conceptually.
The rest of it.
What? Oh, the stuff about Sunny?
We're starting from.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll just talk about it, honestly. I think that's... Wait, this is good.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think I need a good framework. I don't think they're all meets for open either. Yeah. I'll do it. That's fine. Keep it. My charger is right here. I'm not really speaking off the laptop though. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm good. Alright. Case K.
No answer for all that. We should focus on procedural rhetoric and debate, not implications. How we get to this implication. The internal links are more important. More important than the impact. It also means that the actually I'll get to that on the K. They said they want to see one not being able to afford it doesn't really apply. There's new ways to enjoy video games like watching them through Let's Plays or participating that's not the point. That's not the point of the affirmative. The point of the affirmative is discuss Metal Gear Solid 4, discuss its context. You don't have to play arguments that you should analyze these games and look at the master's canon. You don't have to play the game to analyze the procedural rhetoric. You can look at Redmond's analysis or look at different ways to play. They say the goal of video games the goal of this game, even as the goal of this game is to make money. They're going beyond the point. There's internal contradictions. There's internal paradoxes within procedural rhetoric within our argument. That's the right for cards that we've read on the cap game. But those internal contradictions are the best way for players to realize alternatives. Are the best way for people doing a close reading of those video games to understand alternatives to capitalists. Alternatives to capitalists. Want to see three the sexualization debate. One, we solved this. One, the fact that arguments have been published proves that procedural rhetoric surrounding the game has brought to light issue of sexualization of video games and brought to light protests. It means that the fact that Metal Gear Solid has been published is good and creates these values too. No, he's not in his head in disapproval, but seriously, this is an argument. The argument's not really handled it very well. If you focus on procedural rhetoric, you focus on the discussions that are created by those games, and if this discussion is one that's created by the game, means that we solve sexualization. B's concept of player choice. There evidence about the piece of evidence we read is a link to MGS4 continues saying that thankfully we can skip those things. Means players that can choose to skip those things, not participate in that form of procedural rhetoric. Two, MGS4 is the opposite of what they're describing. They ignore Merrill, who's the leader of frog forces against everything. They ignore Sniper Wolf, who's the main boss that you fight, and a main antagonist that you fight, who's more powerful than you. They ignore the boss in Metal Gear Solid 3, which the story revolves around, who's another strong female character. These aren't just female characters who are other members of the Voids. These are female characters who control the story and control the narrative and control procedures within the game. This overwhelms some scenes of sexualization or extra scenes that might happen that are optional because they are integral parts of the story that the player can't skip. They say 3. Neoliberalism outweighs sexualization leads to wars, leads to issues becoming invisible. Meaning that our Giro evidence talks about these populations, talks about the sexualizations being past means that we turn sexualization forward. They don't really hinder our critical evidence. They say that they don't see the root cause, but then the next statement out of their mind is about how they solve the root cause and how sexualization is a big sin that they're ignoring the intricacies of feminists and ignoring the intricacies of feminists. They pointing to one line of sexualization. The fact that they're looking at one small portion and ignoring the bigger part of the game improves our argument, meaning that they're worse for the feminist movement in this internal links term. The internal link terms are argument critique. I'm pretty sure we both agree that the capitalism as a system itself is bad. We think that it happens because of neoliberal control. They think it happens because of the idea of the market's control, which is pretty much the same thing. It's just questions the direction of the link. They say they need one small risk of the link, but they need one substantial risk of the link because we solve devil conflicts through our permutation debate. One, the alpha mutual exclusive with the affirmative. You can look at cultural stories, look at how culture is changed. You can also look at big games as a form of getting away from neoliberalism. The alternative doesn't get rid of the residual links. The alternative is sufficient to resolve the residual links of the plan, meaning that doing the plan plus non-mutual exclusive parts of the alternative, or doing the plan and the alternative, which is essentially do both. Besides whatever part says negative solves. Even if you don't believe that perm solves the impact, it solves the reasons why we use capital forces that can go on the risk of us solving external neoliberalism and external value life impact. Also, their argument that you vote in all other rounds is one of the silliest I've heard. That's the most self-serving interpretation I've heard. It means that you vote negative in every debate just because you permutation voted for. This is a voting issue because it shifts the debate away from arguments. Makes a negative a moving target. And also, the permutation does the entire target plan. Lagos makes a distinction between overall media and video games, saying that video games are not corrupted by policy making and politics, and not corrupted by the overall forces. This is external to a lot of their linked cultural analysis. They also talk about class. I don't understand how this is linked, but it goes there and says it's external. Dwyer reforms also supercharged permutation solves here. At least shows that the app solves because analyzing these contradictions and player analysis of video games creates movements against capitalism, creates a form of mobilization against capitalism. Which means we have a pretty good shot at solving the K. They say some narrative about a factory, but the difference between video games and the factory is that you can't go to the factory, you can't interact with the factory worker. The alternative within our app and within our analysis would be create a game as a factory worker that revolted, or create a game where you work as a factory worker that's press over. Ghost Evidence is pretty good at talking about how this application and connection between player and the game is a better solution to these impacts that we're talking about.
What you get?
339.
339, sorry.
Captain Case. Oh God. Right. First, then case. Okay. Ready? The one error commits the cardinal sin when answering the cap cave. They not answer two particular arguments. The first is they have not indicted the base superstructure metaphor. I am going on this argument. If you accept the assumption that the economic base is what structures they deal like the superstructure, then the affirmative is dealing with the smoke, not dealing with the fire. This means it is try or die for the negatives alternative, because even if they win their argument about challenging neoliberalism, they do not challenge the fundamental class antagonism, the contradiction between labor and resources, as well as technology and the proletariat and the bourgeoisie that is the foundation for those cultural antagonisms to be produced afterwards. Politics and culture come after the economic base, which means solving the economic base means we necessarily solve for the affirmative, which was an argument also made at the top of the criticism that was not answered. The second is they do not have an indite to alternative solvency in the one AR. They have not answered our piece of Tomino evidence, which says that engaging in a broader understanding of the social totality of the economy as well as society is the best way to form a starting point to challenging capitalism, and that is a prerequisite to forming good work. Things like worker solidarity as class solidarity, which is a challenge to capitalism because it organizes ourselves based on the one true universal truth, which is the dialectic in terms, which is the dialectic in the capital T oppression of capitalism. Our piece of Mazzaro's evidence I was reading the 2NC explicitly says that capitalism is not comparable to other forms of oppression because class dynamics are class dynamics transcend all boundaries of race, nationality, as well as ethnicity, which means it is a prerequisite to organizing people politically is to reach out toward this universal structure of oppression. Now, if we win a risk of the link debate, we necessarily outweigh the affirmative. Our evidence that capitalism has produced the worst form of atrocity in human history, that these impacts are also uncalculable, which means that, it's uncalculable, which means that even if they win the majority of their impact arguments, we can still win a try or die claim as well as a better truly to their ethics argument, because it is terrible to work in a factory under capitalism. Now, they say that capitalism is bad, but neoliberalism are roughly the same thing. You do not answer that piece of Giroux evidence that Austin read in the 1 hour, which explicitly indicts this logic. It says that yes, if you think from Giroux's perspective, they are the same thing, but they're actually entirely different. Our red critique evidence says that their form of politics elevates class oppression to a one of many of different politics forms of oppression, but it is the foundational antagonism which breeds other forms of oppression and allows those oppression to actualize ourselves. Our evidence makes the explicit claim that their politics are against things like corporatism and neoliberalism, but they are fine with capitalism proper. This is it's also exemplified in the 1AC when they're fine with the idea that Kojima can make video games. They're willing to trade dead labor through money for those video games just because maybe it's a potential for resistance. I'll go to the permutation debate. I'm not going for that abusive for what he claimed as an abusive argument. Reject the argument, not the team. It was to prove a point why your permutation of other instances wasn't true. Now we have several links to the one to see. Not many of them are answered. The first is the cultural trap. There is something seriously wrong that you should view with a suspicious eye. The idea that buying and playing a video game you can challenge neoliberalism. Never mind the fact that that same video game was made by Konami, who's an $800+ billion transnational company, or that you can play a video game that celebrates violence, and then after playing that game say, oh well, violence is obviously bad, or piece of cold evidence says that this is the postmodern trap of irony. We have already thought that we think ourselves so smart that we have outsmarted the system. We realize that the jokes are being played on us, but nevertheless we still sit there. This is a form of pseudo-politics where we realize that the game is a form of corporatism, that we have bought into it, but nevertheless we think ourselves smarter than that to escape it. The second link is the low bars of resistance. Or Sarkov evidence says that actually you should question why you are even worse than them. They've already said that voting for affirmative is not an endorsement of actually playing the video games, which means they've not answered arguments. I'm not quite sure how they answered any of their role of the ballot arguments, given that we have massively turned their role of the ballot argument in terms of why things like procedural rhetoric is good. You should do a counter role of the ballot. They want to best challenge a form of oppression, which the affirmative would obviously agree with. The third link, which is not answered, is their piece of Gilgit evidence. It's an independent cultural study. This link ultimately implicitly answers their argument why you should make a video game about the factory as an alternative to actually going to the factory. Not only is this pseudo-politics, but it's also incredibly dangerous. Our evidence says that this strategy of cultural study methodology, the one is he attaches itself to its object of study. It isolates the counter-hegemonic strategy, but invests itself in it, it fetishizes itself in it in the Marxist sense. The example is their video game is talking about how awful war is, but using that video game as a medium celebrates that war because it uses war as a medium to sell the game to you in order for the company to promote a profit. In that way, the video game developers as well as the player do not ever want to see a prospect of never thinking about war, moving beyond a society of war, because they've already invested themselves in the prospect of war as a means to entertain themselves, as a means to challenge things like neoliberalism. That argument was not answered, which means they can't. That is a specific indictment and disadvantage to the permutation, because their method necessarily means you tie yourself to the very thing that you are trying to resist, i.e. neoliberalism. They say the affirmative is not mutually exclusive. We have proven disadvantages to the permutation, and even so, there's a risk of disadvantage. There's not an alt solvency indict in the 1AR, which means I cannot understand why you would vote affirmative. They say video games are not corrupted by the political, it's corrupted by the economic base. That is our superstructure argument, which was not answered. They say you should say, I don't know how you go to the factory. Well, maybe you can call them, maybe you can visit them, maybe you can write them a letter, but the point is that making a video game about that factory is not sufficient, because it's an obstacle to politically organizing ourselves, which is the thesis of our Tolmino evidence about why we need a broader understanding of society as totality in order to cultivate things like class consciousness, in order to have a larger scoped revolution, be it violent revolution or be it a rejection of capitalism proper. Now, the case debate, not going for the sexism arguments, but there are a couple of alt solvencies that take out the affirmative solvency. First, they conceded that not everyone is able to afford the video game. Playing a Let's Play does not access the internal links to their bogus evidence. They've conceded that there's already tons of cultural media studies that exist that criticize capitalism. Modern Times, Blood Diamond, Wall Street, Elysium, just to name a few. These are all examples of things that switch off your affirmative. If you don't advocate actually playing the game, you're no different than the status quo.
We have 4:55. Is that right?
I have to do at 5:01.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Right, mate.
Sweet. Where? Yeah. Can we do co-author? Okay. I'll make a new doc then.
because we have.
It's up to you. Don't worry about it.
I think it's.
Creates discussions, creates a better forum. A lot of analysis on the artist of that. Sorry.
It's going to be the affirmative and then
Is this y'all's?
That's your
no, that is yours.
Okay. Okay.
You have gained a flash drive. Alright, everyone ready? Rollabout is an adequate answer, making an easy vote for the affirmative. Rollabout was a vote for the team that best utilized ballot to analyze procedure toward. Only the firm meets this. I hear no disadvantage against the way we analyze procedure toward. They say that they do coming from the criticism out of these rather reasons that the way we interrogate the system may not solve, not the way that they aren't able to actually meet this. It's who best utilizes it to analyze procedure rhetoric. They may say we don't do so hot, but they don't get a reason that they analyze procedure rhetoric well and do not find an alternative way to view the ballot. That means it's a really easy way to vote for the affirmative. They also give her a bunch of other forms of cultural studies here that have failed. Bogos and Six will win this argument. Bogos and Six from the 2AC indicates that video games are uniquely different from other types of media. Specifically, he indicates that that currently contemporary politics is bankrupt. That the only way to breathe new life into an otherwise bankrupt politics and political discourse is using video games to actually understand the systems. And he says that perhaps the most promising future political role of video games will serve to help citizens take on precisely this challenge. Video games are the only media of mass appeal across many ages, demographics, and social ethnic backgrounds that rely on conceptual frameworks. Particular political interests have effectively colonized some media. Video games are made indefinite about their political, but video games might offer the most salient locus for discussions of how we think about political problems. Also, he has an answer to neo-colonial war impact coming from Redmond in 2012. It's going to be pretty good for us on the K. Another thing that they didn't go for is feminism, which is pretty bad because we're able to create discussions and better forms of self for feminism and sexuality, which solves their violence. This will also be another net benefit to the procedural rhetoric that they cannot access on the criticism.
They did most of the impact analysis on that.
Yeah,
for
they already
us.
did all the impact analysis.
We read
on
offense on it.
We read offense.
They
We
don't-
read turns being able to solve this from Redmond and 12. Yeah, that sounds right. From Redmond and 12, it indicates we're able to overcome this because MGS4 has the best procedure rhetoric surrounding feminist and sexual studies. We had offense. They didn't adequately get out of it. On to the K. First off, I don't think he's doing a good job indicating the difference between neoliberalism versus his market internal analysis. All he says is he's yelling base versus smoke. I don't think that's analysis enough to go in depth. I don't think there's a distinction. We're both talking about the same thing. However, we have two independent impacts that the K can't solve. First off, we're able to solve colonialism by interrogating the procedural rhetoric of MGS4 by analyzing that Redmond indicates that we're able to analyze, critique, and examine. Yes, some of our authors do indicate playing the game is good. However, Redmond specifically says analyzing and critiquing. He doesn't indicate that playing isn't key. This means we don't link into a lot of their arguments here. Also, in addition, there's no specific links to our affirmative. Yes, I don't expect you to have specific MGS4 links saying that it's a capitalist interest. However, I expect you to have something about video games because we have our Bogos in 2006 evidence that I was talking about earlier in the speech indicates that video games are just uniquely different from these other types of cultural studies that they're using as their links on this. Means that, if anything, they have no link to very little link because I don't hear any analysis why video games are uniquely different from the other types of media that they present. They talk about Simpsons, yes, that is something that may link into your criticism. However, we're not sitting on the couch just looking and watching something and laughing at ourselves. We're actually getting involved in this. We can just culturally analyze and examine instead of playing them, which means we don't fall into this link. Also, he says that we don't have a foundational attack. However, Redmond 2012 indicates that we are the base to resistance. Video games is this base that we can start attacking, and Redmond indicates this. And the bogus evidence that August 2006 I was talking about earlier also says that these are the most salient locus for discussions that we can actually talk about these political problems. Onto the permutation. There's a few things that he didn't really answer here. First off is that the alternative is enough to overcome the residual links. If our analysis on why they don't have any specific links is a good reason why their alternative will be able to solve the generic and very small links. Our permutation also has two advantages to the critique. First off was the neo-colonial wars are able to come in the feminism, which means that you're going to prefer the permutation.
Perm solves the impact.
Yeah, the perm solves the impact.
The reason why I would use market forces.
The reasons why we would use market force. I also don't hear an impact coming out of the 2NR. He just says that this may turn our solvency because we're not able to interrogate the neoliberal system correctly. Okay, even if they can win that, then we're not able to interrogate the neoliberal system. We can interrogate the neocolonial wars and the feminist studies, and all their links are based on the cultural studies that aren't our AF and. They don't answer the dire Whiteford, Whitford, and Pewter evidence that makes a few arguments for why video game communities and contradictions are a positive, good solving for capitalism. First off, simulation fever. When we play a simulation about issues, even if they're coded under neoliberals or capitalist assumptions, you still create an opportunity to envision a departure from the system. Evidence argues that the simulation fear that we get from participating and challenging those simulations shows that gaming can be a powerful measure for challenging systems. Second is even if games support capitalism through sales, game culture is incubating organized movements and hackers looking for actions beyond neoliberals. And this possibility for mobilization is enough to create the space for terms that worse. These cards prove that the permutation can resolve the bad parts of capitalism. They show that the contradictions within the gaming community are a powerful way for mobilization. Means the permutation solves the impacts. They didn't do enough work here answering a lot of the specific analysis coming out of the 1AR. Also, you're going to see that with the internal contradictions that the game maker has specifically come out and said that the reason he's made this game using it is to create these internal contradictions, using the type of system of the capitalist system, and to be able to produce a game that critiques it, allows us to be able to unify the digital labor, or the digital commons. There is no answer to the digital commons arguments indicating that we can create a movement. I'm going to go all in on the permutation here because it's triad. Like, we solve the K impacts. We have two advantages
that are net
benefits to the criticism. At worst, the neocolonial wars and feminism are outweighed. They gave the analysis for that on the app.
Should I? Sorry, my hand's just like.
Oh, fair enough.
Good bit.
Is there a piece of evidence associated with